Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about how many papers do you need for your PhD? Well, strictly speaking, the answer is 0. You can defend a PhD without a single published paper, actually. And I'll give you an example of that. So a friend of mine and a former colleague was working in the field of natural product chemistry, full synthesis of a natural product, a psychotically complicated molecule that was reported to have anti-cancer properties. But he was not able to complete the synthesis. It was simply too hard, and he used many years on doing this. So for his work on his PhD, he actually didn't get a single publication. But he did get a lot of chemistry and research done. And he had learned a lot of chemistry and research and technologies and had loads of data. And the data was sound, in a technical and scientific, format, and had a lot of experiments to show to. And he had done a damn good job in science. So, but for his for his PhD, he wrote something called a monograph, which is basically, it's more like a book form, so that it's considerably longer than the thesis that is more article based. Because an article based thesis typically has the papers that support the thesis in the appendix, and then you have the main part of the thesis, which then, for example, builds upon, amongst other things, the articles. But the monograph, when there's not articles, published papers in the back, then it typically is much longer. So I think instead of having like a 50, 70, or maybe even 100-page long thesis, his was, several hundred pages long. And that was fine. That was fine with the opponents, and because the work was good. He didn't get into the finish line with that particular project, but he had done enough chemistry, enough innovative chemistry, and really done the work, and he's very successful in his life after his PhD. He's had several leading positions in several companies. But most of the time you'll probably have a couple of articles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even more, that you'll build your stuff upon. But there's no absolute necessity to have, there's at department chemistry, or the fact that you don't have to have at least 3, whatever. Sometimes 2 can be a common number of papers. And why is that? Well, remember that, and from your fields that one paper might be worth 1,000 papers or 100 papers, whatever. Something that's truly revolutionary, that has taken enormous amounts of time. If you've been a part of a huge work, and everything has been put into one enormous paper, come on, that's more than enough, But then there might be other times when you have kind of more, smaller stories that fit better to be as separate papers instead of one chunk. And that might be then a good idea to have them in separate papers. Personally, I've tried sometimes to put several topics into one paper because I wanted the paper to be more chunkier, but I see that that was a bad idea because, you know, the one part of the story kind of got hidden in the other, and I see that I should have probably, you know, had it in several papers. So it's not a, you know, it's not a bad idea to have many papers, and it's not a bad idea to have, you know, few but more chunkier papers. It depends on the work that you've done. So so it's great, you know, if you have papers that are peer reviewed or under review that you can have in your appendix. But what about stuff that you haven't been able to publish? If it's just not enough, you know, to be put in a paper, or maybe you just haven't had the time to put that in a paper, or you're still waiting on results from a collaborator, you know, and the paper is, you know, delayed on that. Well, there's a couple things you can do. The first thing is I would like to recommend is that if you have work that is getting close to a finished manuscript, but it's not quite there, you need to still get some data, but you want to get it out, you might want to publish your work on a preprint server. For example, Chem archive or bioarchive or archive, which are preprint servers, meaning that you can upload your manuscripts for everybody to read and comment and share on Twitter, etc., before it's preprinted, before it's published. And it gets a DOI identification, so then the work is yours, so then it can't be scooped by anybody else. And there's no criteria for that the work has to be, you know, absolutely finished at that point. Using preprint servers is extremely common now in mathematics and medicine and biology, but it's disappointingly not as used in chemistry. But we're getting there. So the American Chemical Society now has their preprint server called Chem Archive. So you can upload your fresh results, put it out there, get it out, and then when it's all ready, you know, maybe even after your PhD, you can send it in for peer review. And then you might ask, why would a peer review process, how would that be affected by that? The paper is already on a preprint. It's no problem. American Chemical Society, Springer, Taylor, Francis, Nature, Elsevier, they all support and even promote the use of preprints, because the thing is that if you put stuff on preprints, you get comments back, typically makes your papers better, your manuscripts better. You can even state in your cover letter that on the preprint you've had so and so many people who have, you know, read the abstract, showing that there's an interest for it, and so forth and so on. So just to summarize so far, you don't have to have papers. There are many different types of papers that will, you know, make it hard to put an exact number on how many papers you should have if that was even the case, but that's a moot point. You can consider putting stuff on a preprint server. And then finally, even if you don't have stuff on a preprint server, remember that it's the main part of your thesis, not the papers, but it's the main part. That's basically what's being evaluated. And I have, you know, in another chapter, I have about evaluation. But there's nothing in that evaluation says how many papers are on there, you know, how high is the impact on these papers or the journals and stuff like that. No, it's about the quality of the work. The quality, have you done the science? Have you shown your maturity, independence, quality as a science? So you can discuss results that you have in your work that one day might be publishable or are publishable or have been published, but it's the scientific quality that's to be expressed in your thesis. So if you have some cool results, cool graph, cool figure, an important table, but it's not yet, you know, finished in a manuscript, put in the thesis, because the thesis that's being evaluated. Okay. So what will these supervisors say? Well, I mean, most supervisors say, yeah, you have to have, these numbers of papers. But remember, if you're in a rough spot time-wise, you might not be getting the papers you want to be published in time. Maybe you can send them in as short communications so that the papers don't have to be written so damn long, and that makes it also a faster process. But it depends very also on what the supervisors say. I mean, some supervisors who I know, who publish regularly in science or nature, they'll say that their students, they don't necessarily expect their students to have one paper, but they expect them to have quality that will be one day a part of a nature paper, right? So that the quality of the work is the important part, and then the publications will then eventually come later. And then you have other supervisors who are more interested in having, quantity and want to make sure that, you have enough papers that you'll get through the thesis evaluation, stuff like that. They want the best for you. They want the best for their group. But I just want to tell you that, for your work, your thesis, and it is your thesis, there is not an absolute number of the number of papers you have to have. It's about the results you have, the quality. And the results don't necessarily have to be positive results. You can have so-called negative results, which are that, a thesis was falsified or results contradicted what was expected or was found with other people or whatever. But negative results and positive results in science, it's the quality that counts. And if you've been in the lab and you've done solid work and you've done the work in a proper manner, then you should be proud of your work, and you should be able to present your work with pride in your thesis, either in the thesis alone, or in the thesis with support of papers, or with the support of preprints and other options. But concluded, you don't have to have a specific number of papers, and there are many ways of doing it. All right.